Hello and welcome back to Detroit Performs. I'm your host, DJ Oliver, and today we have a very unique show for you. We're in Greenfield Village at the Henry Ford, where time seems to stand still in the 19th and early 20th centuries. During this period, there was beautiful traditional art, and then there was functional art that just happened to have beauty of its own. Functional art is where Liberty Craftworks comes into play. We'll take you to all the different shops at the Liberty Craftworks throughout the show. But first up, let's check in with Senior Program Manager of the Henry Ford, Tom Varitek, to show us what Greenfield Village and this area has to offer.
Greenfield Village is, well, it's unique in historic venues. Not only is it an outdoor museum, which those exist here and there, what we represent here is over 300 years of American history. That means you might find a building from the 1600s or all the way up to the turn of the last century, even up to the 1930s, you'll find at Greenfield Village. Liberty Craftworks in particular, though, you're really looking for a sweet spot in the late 1800s at a time when, well, medieval craftsmanship sort of transforms into an industry where pottery, glass, tin reach outside of their immediate communities and are suddenly found as a regional, even national business. This is sort of the industrial neighborhood of Greenfield Village, and it really fits what Greenfield Village was intended to be. And I think the best way to really talk about that is when talking about Henry Ford. Henry Ford is a guy who was the chief engineer for the local power company. He worked on steam engines. He knew where stuff came from. Ford had a moment when he was 19, he took apart his neighbor's steam engine and put it back together again, and the machine worked. And he said, you know what, when I got a hold of that machine, I got a hold of myself. I learned more in that moment than years of textbooks. So he set up Greenfield Village as a place where people can interact with history, actually touch history. Liberty Craftworks tells the story of where things come from. Sometimes this generation and even future ones are getting a little further and further away from actually making things and actually seeing how things are made. You know, stuff just doesn't come from the store. It comes from people's talent, their hard work, their vision, and their design. And we demonstrate that here every day, whether it's in tin, pottery, glass. There are daily demonstrations to see how things are made, and even a few hands-on opportunities so you can try it yourself. Our year-round operational shops are the pottery shop and our glass shop. They have full-time employees, and they make up to over 10,000 items a year in each of those shops, and we actually sell those in the stores. Now, another shop that also supplies the stores to a certain extent is our tin shop. So they're producing stuff, but we don't have the year-round full-time staff that we have in the other shops. We also have a print shop, a weaving shop, and we also have a series of mills. What's really cool is not only are there buildings and processes centered around this mill pond that's behind me, there is a community of artists that contribute not only their hard work, but their talent and their vision to what they're doing, and with that comes an amazing passion towards what they're doing. One of the really cool things I think for an artisan here in Liberty Craftworks is, since we do show production pottery and production glass, production tin, very few places are doing that. And what I mean is that each item is exactly the same coming through, just as it would be in a production shop 150 years ago. Greenfield Village represents 300 years of American history, and it represents it in a way that, well, it's the sights, the sounds that represent that history. And I think a lot of people, whether they're here to hear a long historic lecture about something, read a label, well, sure, we've got that. We can tell those historic stories. But nothing compares to hearing the sputter of a Model T engine go by. Nothing compares to hearing the clip-clop of horse hooves or the smell of a fresh-baked apple pie coming out of a wood stove oven. Those are things that, well, like Henry once said, you can't learn out of a textbook. You have to be here, you have to experience, you have to be immersed into it. So again, whether it's seeing things being made, smelling them being made, hearing it, or just being in the environment, there is a sort of, not only an educational quality, but I'd argue even a rejuvenating quality to Greenfield Village.